Welcome to Midnight Disclosure, where secrets meet the stars and sleep turns into mystery. Our sleep story tonight takes us out into the desert, into a silence so deep that every inhale echoes as though it is from another world. And out in the desert darkness, somewhere, are the runways. Long trenches across the desert surface. Runways that begin bold, wide, and clear and then disappear. No terminus, no destination, just highway that blurs into sand. These are the runways that vanish into the desert. But what are they, and where are they headed? Close your eyes and try to visualize the desert that stretches out under the silver moonlight, a sea of sand and stone so endless that it is timeless, and in the expanse, you see them. Straight, impeccable lines, cut into the earth by invisible hands. They shine faintly in the starlight, stretching out toward the horizon, yet never reaching it. Runways without seeming use. They discontinue sharply, as though the desert itself swallowed them whole, as viewed from above. On satellite photos, they appear as ghost tracks, similar to highways that once led somewhere grand, now forgotten with time. And yet, each and every one is deliberate, built with precision, hidden from the masses. They don't exist in the world of civilians. They exist in another. These are Area 51's hidden veins, America's most enigmatic military base. And yet, why do they vanish? Some claim these runways don't extend above the desert but beneath it, that appearances deceive a cover for what they really are. Under desert hangars, gigantic vaults tunneled deep into the planet, a where planes are flight tested in secrecy, out of inquisitive eyes. Others whisper of alien technology, of triangles and discs that need no conventional runways at all. Vertical takeoff planes, soaring like secrets against the night, needing only an instant on the surface before they shoot up. For such technology, a runway is not a path. It's a stage, a place to make an entrance and vanish. Think of that for a moment. The idea that the runways themselves are not abandoned ruins, but indicators of something otherworldly. There's a reason Groom Lake was chosen. A white, flat, dry lake bed, miles long in every direction. From the air, it is like a canvas, a great clean sheet on which the government could write secrets in strokes too wide to read up close. To stand at the edge of Groom Lake is to feel the heavy hush. No trees, no fences, no cover, just emptiness, watched always by unseen eyes. The runways seem to go nowhere, but what if they go somewhere we cannot? Flares that have flown over Groom Lake speak of off-limits airspace so tight that even military aircraft are at risk of escort if they come too close. Radar displays sometimes light up with things moving at speeds higher than physics can account for, and the few civilian witnesses who have been able to glimpse skies above Groom Lake report lights that rise silently off the ground exactly where those vanishing runways end. One of them happened in the late 1980s. A prospector had been sleeping out in the desert some distance from the proscribed zone. When night fell, he saw a low, unintermitting glow moving along what looked like a black stripe of ground. Then suddenly, without leaving any trace of smoke, of sound, of anything but the fainty ripple of heat where it had been, the light shot up vertically. Much later, when maps of the area were released, that black stripe was discovered to be one of Area 51's notorious vanished runways. Coincidence? Or affirmation? The truth lies in decades of secrecy. On paper, the runways are nothing but test ranges, strips built for test aircraft during the Cold War, when Groom Lake was home to the U-2, the A-12, and the F-117. But even those needed actual runways. Runways with destinations. Runways that connect to hangars and taxiways. The vanishing runways. They go nowhere. They truncate. It's like they were built for something besides planes. Something that doesn't travel in the same way that we do. And then there's where it gets weird. Satellite images show markings on the lakebed that do not look like standard takeoffs and landings. Intricate circles burned into the clay, curving paths that make abrupt turns, bending where no jet would ever make a turn. Trails that seem to start in the middle of nowhere and vanish in the same place. To be in front of Area 51 and look out over that desert is to be standing on the edge of a stage on which a play is being acted out, just beyond your sight. The actors are hidden. The stage is dimly lit, but there is still a sense of performance present in the air. The disappearing runways remind us secrets aren't necessarily hidden underground. Sometimes they're mapped right into the earth, playing to anyone willing to look, but never explained. So tonight, as we slip into this enigma, ask yourself, are these runways abandoned Cold War test sites? Or are they doors? Not doors you walk through, but doors that go out to the sky. Here at Midnight Disclosure, we don't provide the answers. We ask the questions. Questions to lead you into that in-between place of what we know and what we can only dream. And as you close your eyes, envision those lines across the desert, straight, still, vanishing. Runways to nowhere, or perhaps runways to everywhere, because sometimes the strangest secrets aren't hidden beneath. They're etched in plain sight, in the sand, for us to observe. Where the truth echoes more loudly than silence. Continuing with tonight's sleep story, place yourself on the banks of Groom Lake. The air is still at night. The stars shine like jewels overhead, and out in the distance, the desert earth opens its mouth, scored with lines that disappear into nowhere. Runways, or the appearance thereof. The vanishing runways of Area 51 are more than construction projects. They are symbols. Symbols of secrecy, of experiments beyond our reach, of technology that doesn't fit the mold of jet engines and wings. Let's move in closer now, in our minds, to those lines in the sand. You kneel down and reach out and touch the surface hard clay, light and smooth. You follow the line with your eyes until it vanishes, swallowed up by distance, as though the desert is hiding the rest of it, as though the runway doesn't end, but continues below the surface, like a river disappearing into the ground. We forget that Groom Lake is itself a dry lake bed, once filled with water many thousands of years ago. Its clay is hard and flat, nature's runway. For an ordinary plane, it's perfect. But these disappearing runways aren't natural. They're built, measured, lined up. They weren't meant for ordinary flights. Why do they make them disappear? Other engineers who have studied declassified maps suggest that these runways might be clandestine test strips for high-speed vehicles. Vehicles that travel so quickly they don't need to land in the traditional sense. They zip across the desert, take off, and disappear. Still, others point to something strange. That the ends of these runways sometimes align with odd terrain features, door-shaped ridges, slopes that don't match the surrounding geology, as if the runway leads directly into the side of the mountain. That's where the rumors begin. Secret hangars, underground facilities, entrances masked as desert rock. Some alleged insiders have spoken, always cautiously. They speak of doors cut into the Groom Mountains themselves, doors large enough to swallow aircraft whole. The vanishing runways, they say, aren't mistakes. They're indicators to those hidden mouths in the mountains. Taxiways that don't lead to surface hangars, but to underground caves. Imagine it, a pilot flying a craft across the quiet desert night. No control tower lights, no red beacons, just the runway in front of you, then dissolving into rock, and with a whisper of hydraulics, the mountain opens. The craft goes in, and the desert is silent once again. But not everyone who watches from the outside is so sure the runways end underground. Some like to think they never end at all. What if the craft that use them don't need a destination? Witnesses from nearby ridges, decades before they were closed to the public, described lights that would appear from the runways. Round, luminous, blue glowing, sometimes, white glowing others. They'd hover a moment, as if considering the night, then dart off straight up, straight out, gone in seconds. It was compared by one man to watching a stone skip across water, but in reverse. Instead of touching the surface, the craft seemed to leap from the runway into the air, avoiding gravity entirely. The vanishing runways, in this version, are not landing strips, they are launch pads. Stealth stages for technology that moves not by thrust, but by bending the very air around it. And this is the most disconcerting thought. If these runways are for craft not of this world, their disappearance is explainable, for alien technology is not bound by our laws. It does not need asphalt to run for miles. It needs but a marker, a surface hard enough for the briefest contact, after which the laws we know no longer obtain. Take Bob Lazar, for example, who in 1989 claimed to have seen alien spacecraft being tested at a site south of Area 51. He discussed gravity-based propulsion, ships that didn't travel forward but warped space to bring their destination closer. If there's a grain of truth in what he says, then the vanishing runways aren't for airplanes at all. They're for craft that only require them for a moment before shifting into a different dimension of travel, and secrecy surrounds it all. Security patrols of call them the camo dudes monitor all the approaches, white trucks on ridgetops, binoculars glinting in moonlight. Get too close to the perimeter and you'll be met with silence that's heavier than words. Cameras trained on you. Warnings issued in tones that tell you the secrecy is real, though they will never admit it. Even satellite images offer only hints. Lines traversing the desert, visible from the air, ending where they should continue. Some conclude in abrupt curves. Others end in nothing at all, like sentences cut off, their meaning unfinished. Why? Perhaps because the story is not for us. Here at Midnight Disclosure, we ask ourselves, what if the vanishing runways are not icons of our technology, but of something older? Some theorists whisper of ancient alignments, of desert markings that reflect patterns seen at Nazca in Peru, enormous geoglyphs carved into the earth centuries ago, landing strips for guests from elsewhere, or messages written large enough for the sky itself to read. The analogy is chilling. In both cases, the desert holds lines too enormous to make out up close. In both cases, the purpose remains unknown, and in both cases, human beings are left asking the same question: who built them, and why? Tonight, as you read further into this story, let the desert close in around you, let the quiet wrap around you. Imagine the runways straight long and fading into nothing. Runways that might hide doors in the mountains, or be the launching point for flight beyond physics. And as your mind unwinds, ask yourself, if you were at the distant end of one of these runways, alone under the stars, what would you see? Would the desert simply stretch empty before you? Or would you see a light rise up, silent and sudden, and disappear into space? Because sometimes the most horrible secrets are not hidden deep in the earth. They are right before our eyes, carved into the earth, daring us to look, daring us to think, and maybe, just maybe, daring us to dream. Where secrets are kept quiet, and each story brings us closer to truths entombed in the desert. Tonight, we tread more of those catwalks that vanish into Groom Lake, this time with the rumors, the whispers of people who say they've been there for years. The public has gazed at those curious desert lines from a distance, but a handful say they have stood on them. Workers, guards, contractors, brought in on unspeaking planes from Las Vegas. Not tourists, not fantasists, but people whose work took them inside. And if they ever speak gently, quietly, they say, the runways aren't just lines of clay and asphalt. They're doors. One contractor put it baldly. He said that his crew was hired to haul fortified material to Groom Lake in the 1990s. Nothing unusual at first glance. But when the convoy reached the end of a runway, guards instructed them to go into the mountains. He remembers looking down and seeing the runway stretch away into what seemed to be bare rock. And then, unbelievably, the rock flexed. One panel in the slope creaked open, wide enough for the trucks to pull through. It was like the mountain was breathing, he said, and when you were through, it closed behind you. The desert swallowed you up whole. Others followed the same pattern. Runways that don't end, but go in. That carry craft not only across the earth, but beneath it. Doubters attribute such tales to stress-induced fantasy, forgotten highways, or support tunnels. But too much detail overlaps. Mountain doors, vanishing taxiways. Safety so intense that even to speak of it years later feels dangerous. There's also the pilot's story. During the late 1980s, a guy claimed to fly test aircraft for the Air Force. He wouldn't give his name, but in a recorded interview, his voice trembled as he explained what he saw. He claimed to have taxied his jet along a runway at Groom Lake once, getting ready for a secret test flight. But just before departure, ground control routed him off. "Go on," they told him, "but don't ask where." He followed the lights artificial, glowing markers set on the clay ground, till they took him to the side of the mountain. And there, he testified, a black hole yawned open wide, higher than a hangar, wide enough to engulf his plane. He rolled in, engines humming in the darkness. What he saw afterward, he wouldn't speak of. He simply answered, "I wasn't where I wasn't meant to be, and I'll never forget what I wasn't meant to see." What shook him to his very foundation. Others believe it's merely high-tech aircraft, prototypes a few decades beyond our time. Planes so unorthodox they do look like UFOs to those who don't understand aerospace technology. But others have doubts about that. They point to Bob Lazar, who claimed he was working at a plant south of Area 51 in 1989. He described disc-shaped craft, not of man, kept in hangars built into Papoose Lake hillside. Imagine those craft. Silent discs crouched under tarps, their streamlined metal bodies, something never forged by our factories. Imagine them rolled out of huge hangars onto runways that vanish in desert stone, tested in the only air in which they could fly, and remain invisible. If Lazar's testimony is true, then the vanishing runways are no enigma whatsoever. They're not for human-piloted planes. Therefore, something else entirely. But rumors don't stop at craftsmanship. They speak of distant places. One former security guard once claimed he labored down a restricted corridor under Groom Lake. He spoke of elevators hidden in plain buildings. Step inside, insert a badge, and the doors groaned open not to another floor but to a tunnel below ground, long enough that one needed a tram to travel across it. Eventually, he explained to us, the tunnel led into a room, and there, from out of the desert light, were equipment covered in tarps so big they looked like humpback whales in slumber. Runways don't disappear, he said. They go somewhere, and sometimes, somewhere is down. Of course, none of it can be proved. Papers go missing, photographs are forbidden, and all testimony comes shrouded in terror. Fear of observation, fear of persecution, fear of ridicule. That alone is evidence enough. Why risk reputation, pension, or safety to commit to paper a door in the desert if nothing existed at all? Satellite pictures have their own quiet testimony, non sequiturs of lines, curving runways into ridges where there are no hangars, abrupt endings in rocky slopes, as if the world itself were unfinished, or slightly finished to hide what is within. And then, the lights. Most of those who have slept outside the perimeter fence report the same. The runways give off a weak light in the dark, not from lights, but from something below ground, a shine that thumps, which can only be seen at certain angles. Some believe it's heat from subterranean buildings. Others say it's something more unusual, that the runways themselves are energized in ways we can't comprehend. One of the trackers claimed to have seen a craft darkening. Blue glows roll down one of the strips of desert and lift silently, but instead of vanishing in midair, it dropped, with gravity reversed. He avowed that the craft plunged into the desert itself, leaving behind only a glossy of light. Fatigue, mirage, or something else. The whispers grow in numbers when you hear enough of them. Stories from truckers, contractors, pilots, and locals all lead back to the same conclusion, that, in the Nevada desert, runways do not disappear. Runways lead somewhere out of sight, somewhere off dash limits. As we wander deeper into this story, imagine walking those lines yourself. Imagine tracing the runway as it fades into the blackness. Ahead of you, the mountain looms, silent, waiting, and when you think you've reached the edge, the rock convulses, a seam cracks. The desert lies out before you, and you're at the mouth of a secret the world shouldn't see. Would you keep going, or back into the dark? Here at Midnight Disclosure, we pose the question, if the truth lies buried beneath Groom Lake, then every disappearing runway may not only be an engineering enigma, it may be an invitation to ask questions that nobody will respond to. Tonight, we've walked the dry scarring of Groom Lake, followed the rumor of vanished runways, and stood in front of desert doors that seemed to breathe. But as our journey ends, one final question remains: what do these runways really hide? Some argue it's history. I mean, Area 51 has tested some of the most amazing aircraft ever to take to the skies of man. The U-2 spy plane soared higher than anything that existed before. The A-12 Oxcart flew beyond the speed of missiles. The F-117 Nighthawk rendered itself invisible on radar, as though it did not exist. Each was at one time seemingly impossible, but each was spawned in secret hangars at Groom Lake. Is it so hard to believe the runways remain in use, with machines that were decades ahead of their time? Machines that fly so inexplicably, they're confused with otherworldly things. And yet it gets no more mysterious than spy planes. Too many witnesses claim beyond human ingenuity. Engines-less vehicles, soundless lights, movements that defy physics. If they're true, then the disappearing runways aren't merely advanced engineering doors. Doors to technology unknown to us, even quite possibly to travelers not from this planet. For decades, the government had denied that Area 51 existed. Then, in 2013, they finally acknowledged it, but only as a vestige of the Cold War, a site to test jets. That concession was meant to put the lid on, but instead, it opened the book further, because if they could keep a whole base under wraps for half a century, what else could be hiding? And so the runways remain, empty by day, glowing by night. To some, they are scars of clay and concrete. To others, they are symbols, lines drawn across the desert leading us to questions we're not supposed to ask. There's something haunting about Groom Lake at night. From the legal ridges miles away, the base looks still, silent, nothing moves. And yet, those who've kept vigil tell another story. Lights flashing through the dark, forms floating without noise, things disappearing into mountainsides as though the stone had acquired the ability to open and close. In those fleeting instances, the runways appear animate, as though they are not planes, but messages, directional signs to some truth deeply recessed. What truth? Perhaps it's simply the brilliance of human engineers, hidden away for decades until the time is right. Or perhaps something more out of the ordinary. Something waiting beneath Groom Lake, hidden away in vaults and hangars, revealed only under the cover of darkness. Something that was not born here. The desert will not talk. It never has. It simply sits in silence, mile after dusty mile of clay-colored earth stretching beneath the Nevada sky. But if you listen carefully, you can hear the whispers. Whispers of pilots who saw things that could not be explained. Guards who saw glimpses of men under tarps. Laborers who unloaded cargo into mountains that swung open and closed like gates. And always, the runways that end in nothing. Are they beginnings or endings? Are they scars of earth, signatures of secrets? Tonight, when you go to sleep, keep the image in your mind. A path in the desert stretching on, lit faintly under the moon. Behind it, the mountain looms, silent, waiting. And as you move ahead one last time, the desert opens up, pulling you into the unknown. This has been Midnight Disclosure's sleep story, the runways that disappear into the desert. Thank you for coming along for the ride here on Midnight Disclosure, where every secret takes us to the stars. If you felt the mystery tonight, leave your comments below. Do you believe these runways hide something spectacular? Or are they simply scars of abandoned airplanes? The truth can be hidden, but the questions are our own. And until the answers come along, sleep soundly, dream vividly, and never stop listening to the whispers of the desert.